The alarm screamed through the crystal spires of Zephyria Prime like dying angels. Princess Calathea pressed her elegant fingers against the cold metal of her throne room's balcony, watching crimson warning lights paint the night sky in violent strokes. Below, her people scattered like silver leaves in a hurricane, their translucent forms flickering with terror. "Your Highness," came the trembling voice of Commander Vextar behind her. His words carried the weight of doom. The human ship, it broke through our orbital defenses like they were made of morning mist. Calathea's dual hearts hammered against her ribcage, but her voice remained steady as mountainstone. "How many?" "Just one vessel, my princess." "But—" Vextar's voice cracked. "It's already disabled 3 of our battle cruisers. Our weapons barely scratch its hull." The princess turned slowly, her opalescent skin shifting through shades of deep blue to violet, colors that betrayed her growing anxiety despite her controlled expression. Her species, the Ethereals, had ruled the Andromeda sector for 10,000 cycles. They were beings of grace, telepathy, and advanced technology that bordered on magic. They had never known defeat. Until today. "Show me," she commanded. The holographic display materialized in the center of the throne room, revealing a sight that made even Calathea's composed facade waver. The human vessel was a brutal thing, all sharp angles and dark metal, like a dagger carved from a nightmare. Compared to the flowing organic curves of ethereal ships, it looked primitive, savage, but it moved with deadly purpose. "They're heading straight for the palace," Vextar whispered. "Our shields won't hold them for more than minutes." Calathea watched the human ship tear through another defensive line, its weapons firing in precise, calculated bursts. There was something terrifyingly methodical about its approach. No wasted movement, no hesitation, just cold, efficient destruction. "Has it responded to our surrender frequencies?" she asked. "No, Your Highness. It ignores all communication attempts." A chill ran down Calathea's spine. In all the galactic histories, warfare was conducted with honor, with rules, with the possibility of surrender. But humans were different. The few reports that had filtered in from the outer rim told tales of a species that fought not just to win, but to completely dominate. They called it total war. The palace shuddered as the human ship's weapons found their mark on the outer shields. Crystal chimes sang discordantly throughout the halls as the energy barriers fluctuated. "Evacuate the civilians to the lower levels," Calathea ordered. "Seal the blast doors." "And you, Your Highness?" She straightened, and for a moment, her natural bioluminescence flared brighter, a display of royal authority that had intimidated alien ambassadors for decades. "I will meet our visitor personally." Vexatar's eyes widened. "Princess, that's necessary." Her voice cut through his protest like a blade. "If this human warrior thinks they can simply take what belongs to the ethereal empire without consequence, they will learn otherwise." But even as she spoke the words, Calathea felt something she had never experienced before: genuine fear. Not for herself, but for her people, her world, everything she had sworn to protect. The human ship landed in the palace courtyard with a thunderous crash that shattered 1,000 years of carefully cultivated crystal gardens. Steam hissed from its hull as atmospheric converters equalized the air. Then, with mechanical precision, a ramp lowered, and from the shadows of that alien vessel, a figure emerged that would haunt Calathea's dreams for cycles to come. Chapter: First Contact. The human was nothing like the propaganda description suggested. Calathea had expected a monster, some hulking brute covered in scars and crude armor. Instead, the figure that descended the ship's ramp moved with fluid grace that reminded her of the sword dancers of her youth. Average height by human standards, perhaps, but the way they carried themselves spoke of coiled violence barely contained. Warrior wore form-fitting black armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A helmet covered their features completely, its surface smooth and featureless, except for a subtle red glow where the eyes would be. In their hands, they carried a weapon unlike anything in the ethereal arsenal, sleek, deadly, and humming with barely contained energy. "I am Princess Calathea of the Ethereal Empire," she announced, her voice carrying across the ruined courtyard through her natural telepathic amplification. You stand on sovereign territory. State your purpose. The humans stopped at the base of the palace steps. For a long moment, they simply looked up at her. And somehow, despite the helmet, Calathea felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing pressing against her chest. When the human finally spoke, their voice was transmitted through their armor's speakers. It was surprisingly soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying than any roar would have been. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Force, the human said. I'm here for the quantum core. Calathea's blood turned to ice. The quantum core was the most closely guarded secret of her people, a device that could manipulate the very fabric of space-time. If it fell into human hands, the core is not for sale or negotiation, she replied, her bioluminescence flaring to deep crimson. Leave now, and your ship will not be destroyed. The human, Sarah, tilted her head slightly. Look around, Princess. Your defenses are already destroyed, your fleet is scattered. I could level this palace from orbit if I wanted to. She paused. But I don't want to hurt your people. Give me what I came for and I'll leave peacefully. And if I refuse? Sarah's helmet turned toward the city sprawling below the palace, where millions of ethereals huddled in their homes, watching the sky with terrified eyes. The threat was clear without being spoken. Calathea felt her composure beginning to crack. This was impossible. The ethereals were the dominant species in this sector. They had technology that other races worshipped as divine. They had psychic abilities that could crush minds across star systems. They were supposed to be invincible. How had this single human made it all meaningless? You're bluffing, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. One ship cannot hold an entire world. Hostage. Sarah reached up and touched the side of her helmet. Instantly, a holographic display materialized between them, showing the orbital space around Zephyria Prime. Where there should have been empty void, Calathea saw the impossible. Dozens of ships, previously invisible, now revealing themselves, like ghosts stepping out of shadow. Stealth fleet, Sarah explained conversationally. We've been studying you for months, Princess, learning your weaknesses, planning for every contingency. She gestured toward the display. Right now I have enough firepower in orbit to crack this planet like an egg. But I'd rather not. Your people seem nice enough. The casual tone made Calathea's skin crawl. This human spoke of planetary genocide the way someone might discuss the weather. What makes you think you have the right? Calathea descended the steps slowly, each movement calculated to project authority she no longer felt. The quantum core is ethereal technology. It belongs to us. Sarah's helmet tracked her movement. Rights? The human let out a soft laugh. That was somehow more chilling than any threat. Princess, when my people first reached for the stars, we found them full of empires. Civilizations that had carved up the galaxy among themselves, deciding who got to live free and who got to serve. Her voice hardened. We decided we didn't like that arrangement. So you became conquerors yourselves? We became liberators. Sarah's weapon shifted slightly in her hands. Not quite a threat, but not quite casual either. Every species you ethereals have protected in this sector, they're free now. Every world you've taxed into poverty, they keep their resources now. Every colony ship you've turned away from your systems, they have homes now. Calathea felt something twist in her stomach. That's not how it works. The sector needs order. Without the Empire's guidance, it'll figure itself out. Sarah took a step closer. Funny thing about intelligent species, Princess. They tend to be pretty good at governing themselves when nobody's boot is on their throat. The worst part was that Calathea could hear the conviction in the human's voice. This wasn't greed or conquest speaking, this was genuine belief. Somehow that made it infinitely more dangerous. The core cannot be allowed to fall into primitive hands, Calathea said desperately. You don't understand its power. It could tear reality apart. Primitive? For the first time, Sarah's voice carried an edge of anger. Princess, we've been watching your people use that device. You've been hoarding it while entire civilizations live in poverty and darkness. We know exactly what it can do." She paused. "And we know how to use it better." The statement hit Calathea like a physical blow. Impossible. The quantum core was beyond human comprehension. It required centuries of study, minds trained from birth in quantum mechanics that bordered on mysticism. "You're lying," she whispered. Sarah reached up and with a soft hiss removed her helmet. The face revealed was disturbingly human. Young, determined, with dark eyes that held depths of intelligence and will that Calathea had never seen before. But more than that, it was the complete lack of fear in those eyes that shook her to her core. "Dr. Elizabeth Hart," Sarah said, naming the Empire's most renowned quantum physicist. "She's been working with us for 6 months now. Turns out when you offer someone the chance to see their life's work actually help people, instead of being locked away in a vault, they're pretty eager to cooperate." Calathea staggered backward. Dr. Hart was one of their most trusted scientists, a researcher who had devoted her life to understanding the core. If she had defected, she was captured, Calathea said weakly. She was rescued, Sarah corrected, from a laboratory where she spent 14 hours a day studying a device that could revolutionize galactic civilization, only to watch her discoveries gather dust while people suffered. Sarah's expression softened slightly. "She's happy now, Princess. For the first time in decades, she's happy." The world seemed to tilt around Calathea. Everything she had believed about her people, her empire, her purpose. It was all crumbling, like sandcastles before an incoming tide, but she was still a princess. Still the inheritor of 10,000 years of civilization. She would not surrender without a fight. "Even if what you say is true," she said, straightening to her full height, "I cannot simply hand over the most powerful device in known space. I challenge you to single combat. Winner takes all." Sarah blinked in surprise. Then, to Calathea's amazement, she smiled. "A duel? That's actually kind of refreshing." She hefted her weapon. "Princess, I should probably warn you I've never lost a fight." Calathea's bioluminescence flared to brilliant white, and for the first time since the human's arrival she felt truly confident. "Captain Chen," she said, her voice carrying the authority of millennia. "Neither have I." The two warriors faced, each other across the ruined courtyard, and the fate of worlds hung in the balance. Chapter 3. The Dance of Worlds. The courtyard fell silent except for the distant hum of the human stealth fleet orbiting above. Calathea and Sarah circled each other like binary stars, each taking the measure of her opponent. Calathea moved first, her form blurred as she activated her species' natural phasing ability, becoming semi-corporeal for a split second as she lunged forward. Her crystalline blade materialized in her hand, a weapon forged from pure energy and quantum lattices that could cut through solid matter at the molecular level. Sarah's response was brutally efficient. She rolled backward, her human reflexes, somehow anticipating the attack despite its impossible speed. Her weapon, which Calathea now recognized as some form of plasma rifle, spat coherent energy that sizzled through the air where the princess had been standing. "Impressive," Sarah called out, not even breathing hard. "The intelligence reports didn't mention the phasing." Calathea landed gracefully, her eyes narrowing. "There are many things your intelligence reports missed, human." She extended her consciousness, outward, seeking to grasp Sarah's mind with her telepathic abilities. It was a technique that had ended conflicts before they truly began. Most species simply couldn't resist the mental pressure of an ethereal royal. But when her psychic probe touched Sarah's thoughts, it was like striking a wall of pure titanium. Sarah's smile widened. "Mental conditioning. Standard for all special forces. Nice trick, though." Frustration flared in Calathea's chest. Her two greatest advantages, phasing and telepathy, had been casually countered. But she was far from finished. She began to move in earnest now, her form flowing like liquid mercury as she attacked from multiple angles. Her blade sang through the air in arcs of deadly beauty, each strike calculated to exploit the slower reflexes. of a merely human nervous system. But Sarah moved like she was dancing to music only she could hear. Every attack was deflected or dodged by fractions of inches. Her plasma rifle barked in precise measured bursts that forced Calithea to constantly shift position, never allowing her to build momentum. "You're good," Sarah admitted between exchanges. "But you fight like someone who's never faced a real challenge." The words stung because they were true. Calithea had trained for centuries, but always against other ethereals, always within the comfortable bounds of ritualized combat. This was something different, raw, pragmatic, and absolutely lethal. Sarah pressed her attack, and Calithea realized with growing alarm that the human was learning. Each exchange revealed more of her patterns, her preferences, her instinctive responses. It was like fighting a computer that grew smarter with every second. "Tell me something, princess," Sarah said conversationally as she dodged another blade strike. "In all your years of rule, how many times have you actually seen your subjects? Not the nobles, not the bureaucrats, the actual people whose lives depend on your decisions." Calithea stumbled slightly. "What kind of question is that?" "An important one." Sarah's rifle spun in her hands, becoming a close combat weapon as she deflected the princess's blade. "See? That's the difference between us. I've walked through the mining colonies your empire abandoned. I've seen the refugee camps your policies created. I know exactly what's at stake here. You know nothing." Calithea's composure finally cracked, her attacks becoming wilder, more desperate. "The empire has brought order to chaos. We've prevented wars, maintained peace. You've maintained control," Sarah interrupted, catching the princess's blade between the prongs of her weapon and twisting. Calithea's sword went flying. "There's a difference." But Calithea wasn't finished. With a cry of rage, she extended both hands and unleashed the full force of her bioelectric capabilities. Lightning arced across the courtyard, turning the air itself into a weapon. Sarah dove behind a piece of rubble, her armor's systems sparking as residual energy washed over her. When she emerged, her expression had changed from casual confidence to genuine respect. "Now that," she said, checking her weapon's charge levels, "was impressive." Calithea stood in the center of the courtyard, her form blazing with barely contained energy. For a moment she looked every inch the goddess princess. Her people believed her to be terrible and beautiful and utterly alien. "Surrender," she commanded, her voice echoing with harmonics that could shatter crystal. "You cannot stand against the full power of the ethereal bloodline." Sarah considered this for a moment. Then she did something that stopped Calithea's heart. She laughed. "Princess," she said, reaching for something on her belt, "you still don't get it." The device Sarah pulled out was small, unassuming, just a cylinder of dark metal about the size of her palm. But when she activated it, Calithea's enhanced senses immediately recognized what it was. A quantum disruptor. A device that could temporarily sever the connection between an ethereal and the subspace dimensions that powered their abilities. "No," Calithea whispered. "That technology doesn't exist. It's theoretical at best." "Dr. Hart sends her regards," Sarah said, and triggered the device. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Calithea felt her powers drain away like water through a broken dam. Her bioluminescence faded to a dim glow. Her connection to the quantum realm, the source of everything that made her people special, simply vanished. For the first time in her life, Princess Calithea was merely mortal. Sarah advanced slowly, her weapon trained on the now powerless royal. "I could have used this at the beginning," she said quietly. "Ended this fight before it started. But you deserved the chance to show what you could do. Honor's important even in war." Calithea sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the sudden weight of her own body without quantum enhancement. "Kill me then," she whispered. "End this." But Sarah knelt beside her instead, close enough that Calithea could see the unexpected gentleness in her human eyes. "I'm not here to end anything, princess," she said softly. "I'm here to begin something new." She reached out and very carefully helped Calithea to her feet. The gesture was so simple, so unexpectedly kind, that it shattered something deep. in the princess's chest. "I don't understand," Calathea said, tears of silver flowing down her cheeks, another first in her carefully controlled life. Sarah's expression was infinitely patient. "The quantum core isn't going to disappear, Princess. It's going to be shared. Dr. Hart is already working on plans to use it to terraform dead worlds, to provide unlimited clean energy to struggling colonies, to open new trade routes that don't depend on your empire's approval." She paused. "Your people can be part of that, but not as rulers, as partners." The concept was so alien that Calathea's mind struggled to process it. "My people, we've ruled for millennia. It's what we are. Maybe it's time to find out who you could be instead." Before Calathea could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed across the courtyard. Commander Vextar appeared at the head of a squad of palace guards, their weapons raised and ready. "Your Highness." Vextar called out, "Stand away from the human." Sarah didn't even turn around. "Princess," she said calmly, "this is where you make the most important decision of your life." Calathea looked at her loyal commander, at the guards who had served her family for generations, at the palace that had been her home since birth. Then she looked at Sarah, this impossible human who had shattered her world and then offered to help rebuild it into something better. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard with new authority. "Stand down." "Your Highness?" I said stand down. Calathea straightened, and though her powers were gone, she still carried herself like royalty. "Captain Chen and I have business to discuss." The guards looked confused, but they lowered their weapons. Vextar, however, took a step forward. "Princess, surely you're not considering—" "I'm considering the future of our people," Calathea said firmly, "and whether we want to be remembered as the empire that fell gracefully, or the one that had to be dragged, kicking and screaming into a new age." Sarah stood and offered her hand to the princess. After a moment's hesitation, Calathea took it. "Shall we go see the quantum core?" Sarah asked. As they walked toward the palace, Calathea found herself thinking about Dr. Hart, about the mining colonies, about the refugee camps, about all the things she had never seen, never considered, never questioned. Perhaps it was time to start. But as they reached the palace doors, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger story, and somewhere in the depths of space other powers were watching, waiting, planning their response to humanity's bold move into galactic politics. The game of worlds was far from over. Chapter 4. The weight of crowns, the quantum core chamber, lay deep beneath the palace, protected by layers of security that had taken the ethereal centuries to perfect. As Calathea led Sarah through corridors lined with pulsing crystal conduits, she found herself seeing her ancestral home through new eyes. Had the walls always seemed so cold? Had the endless portraits of past rulers always looked so stern, so removed from the lives they governed? "Impressive architecture," Sarah commented as they descended a spiraling staircase carved from a single massive crystal. "Very imposing." There was something in her tone that made Calathea glance back. "You disapprove?" "I'm just wondering who it was designed to impress," Sarah replied diplomatically. "And more importantly, who it was designed to intimidate." Before Calathea could respond, they reached the final checkpoint. The massive door to the core chamber was inscribed with warnings in a dozen languages, each more dire than the last. At its center was a handprint scanner that would only respond to royal DNA. "Last chance to change your mind," Sarah said quietly. Calathea placed her palm on the scanner. "I made my choice in the courtyard, Captain. I just pray it was the right one." The door slid open with a deep harmonic tone, revealing the chamber beyond, and despite everything that had happened, Sarah couldn't suppress a gasp of amazement. The quantum core hung suspended in the center of a vast, spherical room, a perfect crystal sphere the size of a small moon. Energy played across its surface, in patterns that seemed to follow mathematical laws beyond normal comprehension. The very air hummed with potential, and reality seemed slightly flexible near its edges. "It's beautiful," Sarah breathed. "It's dangerous," Calathea corrected. In the wrong hands, it could unravel the fabric of space-time itself. Sarah approached the containment field surrounding the core, her scanner taking readings. According to Dr. Hart's calculations, that's only if you try to use its full output at once. The key is controlled release, channeling its power through distributed networks rather than single-point applications. Despite herself, Thea found the technical discussion fascinating. You really do understand the theory. We had a good teacher. Sarah's expression softened. Princess, Dr. Hart didn't defect because she hated your people. She left because she couldn't stand to see this device locked away while people suffered. She talks about you sometimes, you know. She was genuinely fond of you. The words hit harder than any accusation would have. Dr. Hart had been like a second mother to Thea during her education years, patient and kind, where the royal tutors had been demanding and cold. She never said anything, Thea whispered. Would you have listened if she had? The honesty of the question made Thea flinch. I don't know. That's why she didn't try. Sarah began setting up a communication array, her movements precise and efficient. She knew the system too well, knew that challenging the Empire's policies would just get her reassigned or worse. As Sarah worked, Thea found herself studying the human more closely. Despite her obvious competence, there were subtle signs of exhaustion around her eyes, tension in her shoulders that spoke of tremendous stress. How many worlds have you done this to? Thea asked suddenly. Sarah paused in her work. Done what? Conquered. Liberated. Whatever you call it. This is my first command mission, Sarah admitted, but I've been part of 12 other operations over the past 3 years. And how many of them ended peacefully? The silence stretched long enough to be answer in itself. 3, Sarah finally said, including this one if we can pull it off. Thea felt something cold settle in her stomach. And the others? The others. Sarah's voice carried weight that seemed far too heavy for someone so young. The others chose to fight to the end, to sacrifice their people rather than give up power. She looked up at Thea. You can't imagine how refreshing it is to meet someone willing to put their people first. Before Thea could respond, Sarah's communication array crackled to life. A holographic figure materialized above the device, an older human woman with gray hair and kind eyes that Thea recognized immediately. Elizabeth, she whispered. Dr. Hart's image smiled warmly. Hello, dear. You look well, considering the circumstances. You really did defect. I really did find my conscience, Dr. Hart corrected gently. Thea, do you remember when you were 12 and you asked me why we couldn't use the core to help the drought victims on Kepler 442? The memory hit like a physical blow. Thea did remember. She had seen news footage of the suffering and had innocently suggested using their advanced technology to help. She had been told that such interventions would upset the natural order, that the Empire couldn't be seen playing favorites. I told you it was complicated, Dr. Hart continued. But it wasn't complicated at all. It was simple. We chose not to. Help because helping would have cost us political leverage. We let people die to maintain our position. That's not, Thea began, then stopped. Because looking back, she could see the pattern. How many times had the Empire's policies prioritized control over compassion? How many opportunities to help had been dismissed as politically inconvenient? I've been working on something, Dr. Hart said, her image flickering slightly as the transmission adjusted. A way to use the core's power that doesn't require centralized control. Imagine quantum energy networks that can be maintained by local populations. Clean power, terraform capabilities, even basic manufacturing, all without dependence on the Empire's approval. Sarah activated another display, showing schematics that made Thea's enhanced mind real. The elegance of the design was breathtaking, a true democratization of quantum technology. It would change everything, Thea said wonderingly. Everything, Dr. Hart agreed. The question is whether the ethereal empire is ready to be part of that change, or if it needs to be removed from the equation. The threat was gentle but unmistakable. Calathea looked around the chamber, at the core, at the ancient symbols of power, at the human warrior who had brought her world to its knees with nothing but superior tactics and unshakable conviction. "What would happen to my people?" she asked quietly. "To the nobility, the administrators, everyone whose lives are built around the current system?" Sarah's expression was surprisingly compassionate. "The same thing that happens to anyone when their world changes, Princess. They adapt or they get left behind, but they get the chance to adapt, which is more than some empires have offered when the tables were turned." A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. Sarah frowned and activated her personal communicator. "Chen here." The voice that emerged was crisp, professional, and deeply concerned. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy buildups in 3 adjacent sectors. It looks like the hegemony is mobilizing a response fleet." Calathea's blood ran cold. The hegemony was an alliance of militant species that had long coveted the ethereal's territory. If they thought the empire was weakened— "How long do we have?" Sarah asked, her casual demeanor instantly replaced by military efficiency. 18 hours, maybe 20 if we're lucky." Sarah ended the transmission and looked at Calathea. "Princess, I'm afraid our timeline just got a lot shorter. The hegemony will attack whether you succeed here or not," Calathea said, her mind racing through the implications. "If they think the empire is fallen, they'll move to claim our territory, and they won't be as gentle as you've been. Then, we need to show them that the empire isn't fallen," Sarah said grimly. "It's just under new management." Dr. Hart's image leaned forward. "The quantum network I've designed. It could be implemented in hours rather than months if we had the right coordination, but it would require complete access to the core and someone who understands both the technology and the political situation." Sarah looked at Calathea. Someone like a princess who's decided to put her people before her pride. The weight of the moment settled on Calathea's shoulders like a mantle made of neutron star material. Everything she had been raised to believe, everything she had thought she understood about power and responsibility, had been turned upside down in the space of a few hours. But as she looked at the quantum core, truly looked at it, not as a symbol of royal power but as a tool that could reshape the lives of billions, she felt something she had never experienced before. Hope. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Sarah's smile was brilliant. "Help us save your people, Princess. All of them." As alarms began to sound in the distance, warning of the approaching hegemony fleet, Calathea realized that her real education was just beginning, and the most important lesson might be learning that sometimes the greatest act of leadership is knowing when to stop leading and start serving. The core pulsed with ancient light, ready to be reborn as something new, just like the empire it had powered for so long. Epilogue. New constellations. 6 months later, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly christened research station orbiting Zephyria Prime, watching as the latest batch of quantum generators came online in the Kepler 442 system. The drought-ravaged world that had haunted Dr. Hart's memories was now blooming with new life, its deserts transformed into gardens by technology that had once been locked away in royal vaults. "The efficiency reports are better than projected," came a familiar voice behind her. Calathea approached, carrying a datapad and wearing the simple work clothes of a research coordinator rather than the elaborate robes of royalty. "The distributed network is actually more stable than the centralized system ever was." Sarah smiled. "Dr. Hart always said the best designs work with natural systems rather than trying to control them." Speaking of whom, Calathea activated the pad's holographic display, revealing the familiar figure of their mutual mentor. Elizabeth Hart looked years younger than she had during the tense days of the transition, her eyes bright with the satisfaction of work well done. "Good news, both of you," Dr. Hart announced. "The hegemony ambassadors have agreed to the non-aggression pact. Apparently they're less interested in conquest when their neighbors have unlimited clean energy and terraforming capabilities. It had been a near thing, The hegemony fleet had arrived expecting to find a weakened empire ripe for plunder. Instead, they had discovered a transformed civilization backed by human military technology and powered by freely shared quantum innovations. The brief standoff that followed had ended not in battle, but in the most comprehensive trade agreement in galactic history. Any word from the other sectors? Sarah asked. The Crystalline Collective wants to join the network, Calathea reported, and 3 more human colonies have volunteered for the cultural exchange program. Sarah nodded, though her expression remained thoughtful. The transformation of the ethereal empire had been just the beginning. Across the galaxy, other civilizations were watching, waiting to see if this new model of cooperation could truly work on a larger scale. Regrets? She asked Calathea quietly. The former princess considered the question seriously. About giving up the crown? No. About not doing it. Sooner? She gestured toward the display showing dozens of worlds now connected by the quantum network, their populations free to trade, travel, and communicate without imperial oversight. Every day. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. Sarah's expression grew serious as she activated her communicator. Chen here. Captain, this is Admiral Rodriguez. We've got a situation developing in the Outer Rim. The Dominion of Suns has made contact and they're interested in discussing terms. Sarah exchanged glances with Calathea. The Dominion was one of the largest and most powerful empires in the galaxy, controlling nearly 1,000 star systems through a combination of military might and economic stranglehold. If they were ready to negotiate, what kind of terms, Admiral? They want to meet with you personally, Captain. And they've specifically requested that Princess Calathea be part of the delegation. Calathea raised an eyebrow. I'm not a princess. Anymore, Admiral. Tell that to the Dominion. Apparently, word of your career change has spread. They're calling you the princess who chose her people over her throne. It's become something of a legend in the diplomatic circles. Sarah couldn't help but smile. Well, Ambassador Calathea, looks like you're about to make history again. Ambassador? Calathea tested the word, finding it surprisingly comfortable. I like the sound of that. As they began planning for their next mission, Sarah found herself thinking about the young woman who had challenged her to single combat in a crystal courtyard. That person was gone, replaced by someone who had learned that true strength wasn't about holding power over others, but about using power to lift others up. There's something else, Admiral Rodriguez continued, his voice carrying a note of urgency. Our intelligence suggests the Dominion isn't acting alone. There are rumors of something called the Ancient Compact, an alliance of the oldest empires in the galaxy. If it's real, and if they're mobilizing, Sarah felt a familiar chill run down her spine. She had hoped that the peaceful transformation of the ethereal empire would serve as an example to other civilizations. But power rarely surrendered itself willingly, and the galaxy was full of empires that had ruled for millennia. How long do we have? She asked. 6 weeks, maybe 8. The Dominion wants to meet at the neutral station in the Nexus system. Captain, if this goes wrong, if the Ancient Compact decides to make an example of us, then we'll deal with that when it happens, Sarah said firmly. Humanity didn't come this far by backing down from challenges. Calathea touched Sarah's arm gently. We'll deal with it, she corrected. The quantum network isn't just about sharing technology anymore. It's about sharing responsibility. None of us face the future alone. As if summoned by her words, the holographic display lit up with dozens of new connections. Representatives from worlds across 3 sectors appeared, humans, ethereals, and a dozen other species that had joined the growing alliance of free systems. We heard about the Dominion situation, said Commander Thex of the liberated mining colonies, his scaled features set in determination. Our defense fleets are at your disposal. The terraforming crews can be combat-ready in 12 hours, added Director Voss from the agricultural worlds. We owe our new lives to this alliance. We won't let it fall without a fight. One by one, the representatives pledged their support. Worlds that had been enemies for generations stood united by the simple principle that cooperation was stronger than conquest. Sarah watched the display with growing amazement. This was what they had been fighting for. Not just the liberation of individual worlds, but the creation of something entirely new. A galactic civilization based on mutual aid rather than dominance. "Dr. Hart," she said, addressing the older woman's image, "how quickly can we expand the quantum network to include our new allies?" "Give me 3 weeks," Hart replied, her eyes gleaming with the challenge. "But Sarah, if we're going to face down the ancient compact, we'll need more than just technology. We'll need something they can't comprehend or counter." "Which is?" Dr. Hart's smile was mysterious. "The power of people who have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for." As the transmission ended and the various representatives began coordinating their response, Calathea found herself standing beside Sarah at the observation window. Below them, Zephyria Prime sparkled with new lights, not the cold crystalline glow of imperial power, but the warm radiance of a world reborn. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked quietly. Calathea thought about the question seriously. A year ago she would have answered with royal arrogance, secure in the belief that her empire was invincible. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified by the scope of what they were attempting. Now she felt something different. Not certainty, the future was too vast and unpredictable for that. But confidence. The quiet assurance that came from knowing she was part of something larger than herself, something worth fighting for. "I'm ready to find out who we can become," she said finally. "All of us together." Sarah nodded, her reflection in the transparent aluminum showing the same mixture of determination and hope that Calathea felt in her own chest. Outside, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, but for the first time in galactic history, those patterns were changing. The age of empires was ending. The age of cooperation was just beginning. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, ancient powers were stirring, preparing to discover that humanity's greatest strength had never been their weapons or their technology. It was their stubborn refusal to accept that the universe couldn't be made better. The war for the galaxy's future was about to begin. But this time, it wouldn't be fought by empires seeking to conquer each other. It would be fought by free peoples, standing together against the darkness, ready to prove that even the oldest powers in the galaxy could learn to change. The stars themselves seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if the universe itself was holding its breath to see what these unlikely allies would accomplish next. In the depths of space, fleets were gathering. Ancient weapons were being prepared. Empires that had ruled since before humanity first looked up at the night sky were making their plans. But on a small research station orbiting a world that had chosen hope over tradition, 2 former enemies turned partners were already planning their response. The game of worlds was far from over. It was just getting interesting.